So we have here Brian from Viva Real, Mate from Printy, and David from Nubank. I'll ask them to initially introduce a little bit about their own stories and a little bit about their company. This is just for you guys to learn a little bit more about them and to get you thinking about the questions that you're going to be sending us. Okay? So, Brian.
Good morning. Bom dia. Agradeço ao Juliano e o time de Endeavor também pelo convite. Thanks for the invitation here. It's great to be here with everybody, share a little bit more about our stories. So I'm Brian REQUARTH. I founded Viva Real. I'm from California originally. I've been living in Brazil for about 5.5 years. I'll get into my journey about how I got down to Brazil, but basically we're a marketplace that connects people with properties across Brazil. So yeah, we'll share a little bit more about that later on in the presentation.
Hi guys, good morning and thanks for having us. My name is Mate. I'm the co-founder of Printy. Printy is an e-commerce business for mass customized materials. So anything from business cards to flyers and more complex products like even packaging and labels and stickers, promotional materials. We're essentially a one-stop shop for small and medium businesses to get all their printing needs done in Brazil. And well, I've been here in Brazil for about 5 years. I moved down here together with my co-founder Florian. And yeah, we'll get a little bit into our stories later, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, good morning. My name is David VELEZ. I'm the founder and CEO of Nubank. Nubank is a digital finance company competing in the financial services space in Brazil. Today, known for a purple credit card some of you might hopefully already have. I'm originally from Colombia, moved in Brazil twice. The first time was here as an investor. Got very excited about Brazil, and then the second time came back to actually as an entrepreneur to start a company. And happy to answer any question later about Nubank or the path.
Thank you, guys. So the idea today is to talk about changing in the ecosystem and big changes for Brazil. And these guys here are Gringos that came to Brazil to give us a big hand in doing that. We're going to delve deeper into talking about how this is not jabuticaba, something that we invented in Brazil, but it's definitely something that we have to do more, and we need to count on their feedback to make that happen. But starting off from the beginning, what was the motivation, the original motivation to have you guys come down here? And what was your expectations, and how do you read the reality now after a few years and a lot of work here?
Sure. So as I mentioned, the first time I came here as an investor was working with a venture capital fund out of California and trying to find opportunities to invest in technology in Brazil. And very quickly what I realized is I wanted to be on the other side of the table. I thought there were way more opportunities to start businesses in Brazil rather to be investing in businesses in Brazil. And it was all about sort of seeing what the day-to-day issues of, the day-to-day problems and bureaucracies tend to be. Every single one of those seemed to me like an opportunity of a business that was waiting to be started. So eventually I came to a conclusion. One of the things that I always wanted to do was starting a business. For a while I thought about starting actually a startup in the US. Eventually came to a conclusion that I was more differentiated in Brazil than in the US. US is a extremely competitive place, ton of capital, ton of very qualified people. It's hard to find differentiation. In Brazil, I saw a lot of opportunities in a lot of different sectors, and I thought that with the knowledge and the experience that I already had was going to be able to focus on one idea and had a little bit of an edge versus other entrepreneurs in the market. So eventually moved to Brazil to start Nubank, and it's been a really great experience.
Pegando o gancho de Colombia here, my experience actually, I started off in Colombia. I drove from California with my car to Costa Rica, bought a one-way ticket to Colombia. Usually there's a woman behind these stories, so.
There you go.
My case, no different. My wife is Colombian, and when I moved to Colombia, I had a terrible experience finding property. and you know, it was just very complicated and wasn't very transparent. And so, based on that kind of difficult experience, coincidentally, I'd read a case study of Mercado Libre and saw that there was this very large business in Latin America. And when I looked at the numbers, I saw how big Brazil was on their revenue in terms of the size of their business. And I traveled to Brazil years ago on vacation and kind of fell in love with the place. So at my mind at one point I said, at some point I will come back to Brazil, but I didn't really know what it was. So it was maybe less practical, more practical in the sense that I was drawn to Brazil and I saw a large opportunity. So a little bit more context about how I got here.
Mate.
Yeah, I think we all share a lot of commonalities in this sense. We all came because of the opportunity. In my case specifically, I'm German. I grew up in Germany, went to college in the US, so I also had this sort of European-US foundation and saw a lot of the differences between developed markets and emerging markets, points that Davi alluded to, and really saw sort of this deep blue ocean of opportunity in Brazil specifically. So looking at the time, we looked at a bunch of different emerging markets, and we saw Brazil and the BRICS in general, growing off the charts. Christ the Redeemer was taking off on the cover of The Economist, and we said, well, there's got to be some sort of angle to this market. How can we sort of work this opportunity and solve real problems, real issues in these markets that have certainly more fundamental problems and less heated competition than in the US. So we moved down here to Brazil, and we found an incredible list of massive markets, really deep blue oceans that are very fragmented and that had limited amounts of competition. So we said, let's go after a market that where we can really add value to the customer, where we can really sort of increase the level of service and really increase the quality of the experience to the customer.
Great. So let's go for the first question here, which asks about the barriers and bureaucracy and how it is hard to start a business in Brazil. They ask what is harder than you expected and what is easier, if anything. I think it's a good lead to a question we had here. And what I mentioned before is that having international founders is actually not something new. Some stats in the US, more than half of the companies that succeed raising capital in the US, Series A, B, and so on, they have at least one founding member that is non-native from the US. So this is actually, these guys are very good examples of something we should be encouraging and seeing more and more. So with that as a background, what is easy and what is really hard for foreigners in Brazil or entrepreneurship in general?
Well, I think, and it's interesting because it's what's hard, and it's also at the same time ends up being, that's exactly the opportunity. That's exactly the reason why Brazil, a lot of times, ends up making a lot of sense. For me personally, I had moved to Brazil and was establishing a life here, needed to get an apartment, and that needed a garantia, and that was really hard. And then the second thing I needed to do was getting a bank account. And it took me 6 months to get a bank account. And it was incredible, the experience. I had to, everybody kind of have seen a branch. You go through the branch, you have to grab your wallet and your cell phone and you put it in a locker. And then you have to go through a bulletproof door and you have guys with guards looking at you as a criminal. And it's almost incredible to think that the experience of a banking customer is the experience of a criminal, of almost a person going through the security line in the US when they're looking at you with as you're trying to do something wrong. So it was extremely frustrating to me going through that experience, waiting 30 minutes, calling call center, giving a lot of information, and then suddenly that's what sort of started clicking is, why is this opportunity like this? Why is it so hard? Why is there so much bureaucracy to be open a bank account in an industry, in a market where consumers are paying the highest interest rates in the world? And they're paying the highest fees in the world. How is it possible that these consumers are paying this type of fees and they are getting this experience in return? Doesn't make any sense. And so part of that bureaucracy and frustration ended up being sort of the nascent or the initial seed of Nubank in figuring out how can we make or how can we offer products that are more consumer friendly and that can kind of cut through the layer of bureaucracy. So setting up the life and kind of getting established was hard, but that ended up being part of why I eventually actually started staying here.
Yeah, just to add to that same kind of 6-month period, I think it took us 6 months to actually open the business, being a foreigner. And then when we did have the business opened, I remember I couldn't get a bank account, and the frustration around that. So I'm just waiting for you to have your bank officially so we can. But I think that's something that actually you mentioned the criminal. I actually did feel like a criminal because I legally couldn't work here, and so imagine that. I'm here. I'm investing my own money. I'd sold my apartment, taken all my money and invested in this business in Brazil, yet I can't open a bank account. The absurdity of that is pretty remarkable. So hopefully things change in the near future. But definitely there's a lot of challenges as a foreigner. But like David said, when there's challenges, you're presented with even more opportunities because if it was easy, everyone would do it. So I think that's why we're all here.
Yeah, once we talked about it, I'll shift to Mate in a minute. Brazil is sort of the flip side of the US. There is easy to start, and it gets hyper competitive really fast. Here's the opposite. It's really hard to start, but you have a slightly easier ride once you establish yourself because of the competition.
Our business in the US, for example, the players that are really strong there, they'd raise $80, $100 million. And so for us to compete in that market, just didn't make any sense. In here we saw a lower barrier to entry, lower kind of quality of service, and so there was in a very large market.
Excellent.
Yeah, I feel like Brazil is a market where you can certainly do a lot more with a lot less. I think both in the sense of competition, but also if you're smart in terms of navigating the bureaucracy and making it work in your favor, you've pushed that boulder up the mountain, you've surmounted all the barriers in the beginning, then you certainly have an easier time. If you find a way to open your bank account eventually, if you find a way to eventually have an apartment, we've all gone through very similar experiences. In my case, I lived in a house with 10 other foreigners for about 6 to 8 months until we could finally rent an apartment. So these kinds of experience are almost like a vetting process. But once you've surmounted these barriers, you're kind of in, and you can do a lot more with a lot less. So when it comes to sort of setting up your business initially, getting employees motivated, really selling people on the vision, you're not competing with 1,000 other Silicon Valley, top startups. You're competing with a lot of traditional businesses in many cases in the market. So, if you're Nubank, if you're Princi, if you're Viva Real, you're at a point where you can get some of the best talent, objectively some of the best talent in the market, and attract these people to work for you. Something that, again, comparing to Silicon Valley or even London or Berlin, is something that's infinitely more difficult.
Yeah, that's perfectly to another question here, which is moving from the framework, the legal, the red tape around the companies into inside and the culture and the teams itself. So what was the surprise you had in terms of your own background, your own culture, and the way Brazilians work, if any? And how did you go about designing the team, given that you're bringing a completely different perspective, but local knowledge is also required, I think, for pretty much each of the businesses that you guys are building?
I'll take that one. I think for me, in my case, I was very, very, very fortunate in that I had a co-founder who was Brazilian, Diego Simon. And literally, I was very lost at the beginning when I first got here. No falava quase nada. I couldn't, I didn't know how things work. So I think that as a foreigner and finding, and I think this reflects the same concept of building a team, right? When you build a team, you've got all these challenges of a business. You guys are all building your businesses. You need to find people that can support you and navigate the difficulties of building a business. So in my case, I was very overwhelmed by the process. I think maybe unlike the two of them, I started with zero money. I think you also, from the very beginning. So when you don't have any financial resources, you have to be very creative with how you navigate the challenges. So definitely having people that can support you and that understand how things work was fundamental, and I couldn't have done it without the people that, like Diego, my other founders, to get it going.
Yeah, I think in our case, we had a couple of interesting surprises there. I mean, I think in retrospect, we were very much surprised by the quality of execution that people would bring to the table. What we felt we brought to the table as founders was really selling people on the vision and being there when people need to think outside the box. Obviously, Brazil is a market that conditions you very much to think inside the box and follow the bureaucracy, follow the standard patterns of the market, and you're part of the system, so it's really hard to break out of it. We as founders, we came in and we said, well, this is the status quo, let's question it, let's disrupt it, and let's try to do something different here, and let's consolidate our market that way. I think all of our businesses are working inside very traditional industries where once you hire good people and you open their eyes to sort of what the possibilities are, if you can break the paradigms in your segment, there's a tremendous amount of talent that can execute on that mission. So we at Princi, we've built a team that today, as we sort of benchmark this team to our international competitors, we actually see superior levels of productivity in our manufacturing. We see superior levels of productivity and efficiency on our marketing side. So, we can objectively actually say at this point that we've built an execution machine in Brazil that works at similar or better standards than in many other developed markets, actually. So for us, it was very much a sort of combination of the outsider's mentality to break the status quo combined with the execution talent of locals here in the Brazilian market. There's two of us as foreigners in the business, but 99% of the other employees are Brazilians, and that's really the foundation, that's the base of the company today.
Yeah, for us, it was also a number of surprises. One of the big surprises is there is a lot of conventional wisdom about how Brazilians are, how Brazilians operate. So one of the most common one is you can't start meetings on time in Brazil. And it's kind of understood that people will be late because there's always traffic. But the moment we start a company and we create a culture where we start on time and we end on time, people start coming on time. And when we said traffic is not an excuse, there's always traffic, so you have to plan for that. People started coming on time, and we start on time and end on time. So, and like that, there's a number of things that we've changed. For example, stock options. We have a similar to a lot of Silicon Valley companies, we have a very wide stock option plan in the company. It's not very used to in Brazil, but we've explain to people how it works. We want to create this ownership mentality where everybody, since the very first person that joined Nubank at 18 and 19, and by the way, the average age of Nubank is 26 years old, so it's very young people. But we want to create this mentality where if you, the very first day, you're an owner. This is your company. There is no chefe y empregado. You really form part of this culture, and stock options form part of that. So we were able to create this mentality. And so maybe the bigger surprise has been that there is a lot of kind of accepted understanding of how Brazilians operate, how Brazilians are, but there's nothing innate about it. It's more how you set up a culture and a context, and then create incentives to create your own culture within the company. And that's what we have as our company ends up being very mixed. We have a lot of foreigners, we have a lot of local Brazilians, so it's a very unique culture.
We start out with a lot of foreigners initially too, and I found us moving away from that model, the importance of having local people. And on the stock option side, I think one of the challenging things in Brazil is there hasn't been a tremendous number of exits of very large companies. You've got the Mercado Libres, the Decolars. Hopefully, there's a few other companies in the next 4 or 5 years that will build these big businesses. The great thing about the U.S. is that this ecosystem is so strong. When you have the success of a large company like a PayPal, all these other people that participate in that process that had stock options, they go back and reinvest in those other companies. They mentor. And so I think that it is very nascent in Brazil, and I'm very confident that over the next 5 or 10 years, talking a little bit about venture capital, that's now transforming. And I think that when I first got to Brazil, the sexiness of working at a startup wasn't there. I remember talking to some really, really smart people, but there was a little bit of fear of like leaving your good job in banking. And I think that the early people at Viva Real, they took that bet and they joined and they left kind of this traditional career path. And so I see that transforming in terms of the mentality and the willingness to take a little bit of risk, to take that ownership piece and maybe not just focus 100% on, I want to maximize my salary, but really participate in the upside of the building a long-term business. So I think that's something that's changing. Hopefully it'll change more over the next 5 or 10 years with more successful companies.
Absolutely. And if there are a few blessings from the long crisis that we are going through, I think team is precisely one that it's most noticeable. The quality of people joining, not only the management team and the founding team of startups in Brazil, second and third tiers in the last 2 years is really, really great. So I think, I agree 100%. In 3-5 years, we're going to see the results of that. We would rather not have the crisis, but since it's there, let's not waste it, right? Yeah, right. I'm getting here a persistent question about the aspects of the Brazilian culture and how that affects, inside the company and the interaction between the company and other players. So I think they are asking to, give your perspective, bitch about the Brazilians a little bit. I think they want a crude feedback of how we should be acting differently based on your experiences. Be nasty.
Maybe I can give it a shot. So, and I already alluded a little bit to that, but to me, and this started really since the very beginning when I was starting to think what type of business I wanted to start. The kind of the sentences or the phrases that repeated again and again were, no Brasil você não pode. Brasileiro no Brasil você não dá, não pode. In our case was, you can't start financial services firms in Brazil. The big banks will kill you. The regulators won't let you. The tax is impossible. You won't be able to raise capital. It was out of 30 people that I probably talked to initially, experts in the industry, coming from the industry, all of them without exception said, you can't start a business here. It's almost like a sacred industry and you cannot touch it. And você é gringo, você não sabe. So let it as it is. And that was one sort of, is just a lot of sort of conventional accepted wisdom of how things should be and how people should behave. After that, there's been a lot of those in the company, and in every area we've seen a lot of those patterns. One of them was you cannot hire really good people to do really good customer service. It's not a job that good, smart people want to do. We've hired great people from great universities talking to our customers and giving them great service. Or it's hard to do the regulation or central bank. We talked to regulators and they've been very, very, very friendly and they've been very supportive. Or the mentality or the being late or people don't understand the corruption. So maybe sort of the one point that I would bring is just kind of question this understanding of in Brazil you can't, or Brazilians don't do that, or they don't behave in a certain way. Because I think if the right conditions exist, people will surprise you and Brazilians will surprise you. And there is a lot of potential and talent in Brazil. And so it's a matter of really challenging a lot of those established conventional wisdom.
Just to add to that, I think that one of the things that I was really struck by when I first got to Brazil is the importance of hierarchy. Being from California and kind of the culture, in companies in Silicon Valley is if you're an intern, you can make an impact in the company. And I think that that's one thing that I really saw and I suffered with, because many times, we don't have the best vision of every detail and we make mistakes. And the thing that really bothered me is when things were not doing the right thing and someone maybe didn't agree with it, but they said, oh, but you said we should do this. And I said, do you think that we should do that? And they say, no. And I'm like, well, don't do it then. And at the very beginning, we even had one of our kind of core values that we wrote down, which was what my co-founder called as, don't do things you think are stupid. And we literally had to tell people, if you think this is stupid, tell me I'm stupid. I'm okay with that. If you've got a better way, and it goes to another kind of element of culture, which is best ideas win. If you're sitting around the table and you've got someone that just came out of the university and they don't have a lot of experience, but they've got a really unique perspective, listen to those people, empower people. So I think that the hierarchy can be very damaging because many times, especially in companies that have frontline people in customer service or in other areas, they're talking to the customer. They know what the customer says. So you've got to empower those people to be able to make decisions, because if they just sit there and do what you say all the time, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. So I think empowerment is key, and that's one thing that I think is lacking in Brazil. It's very difficult, but it's very important.
Yeah, I think adding a little bit to that, the key difference that we've felt once we implemented a very flat hierarchy at Princi was that people not only came forward, people not only started bringing ideas to the table, but people also felt much more proud and confident about what they were doing. So I think all of this is obviously interconnected. Hierarchy and obedience and empowerment, on the other hand, of employees. Understanding that they can bring great and powerful ideas to the table, and then decisions will be taken based on that, and that will really push the company forward. So we take a very data-driven approach to that, and we highlight to people that their KPIs are great. We highlight to them that if a project was executed well, that deserves merit, and that's something that is communicated very openly and transparently in the company. So data-driven meritocracy at the end of the day is what brings people this sense of ownership and sense of being a real owner. They might have stock options, they might not have stock options, but they feel like they're really contributing to the business. Something that I felt was really lacking in the market, and a lot of traditional Brazilian companies is missing for people to be able to step forward, execute based on their ideas, and realize that they're actually doing great things. They're doing great things not just within the company, but also objectively in the market. And also, I'll go further than that. We say this a lot to our employees. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Borrowing a little bit from Frank Sinatra. But if you can make it here in Brazil, you can really make it anywhere. So as we look to other markets, for example, other emerging markets, objectively, Brazil is one of the hardest markets to operate in. So Brazilians, employees, need to feel this sort of pride that they're navigating a very, very difficult ecosystem. But if they are doing well, they're really doing well on sort of a global scale.
Fantastic. I've got a question here that switch gears a little bit, and it will tap into your experience as entrepreneurs, but also as investors, something we're going to talk about a little bit later. So picking on your experience, there was a publication this week on LinkedIn saying that Brazilian startups should be born with the mentality to being global from day one. You guys are actually doing the opposite. You come with a global mentality and are addressing the Brazilian market, at least as a first stepping stone. How do you see these two business questions? How do you go about the two strategies?
So VELEZ started out, as I'd mentioned, I read this case study from Stanford or Harvard about Mercado Libre, and I saw this opportunity of Latin America. And we actually started off being inspired by becoming the Mercado Libre of imóveis. So we wanted to be in all these different countries. And quickly, we realized that, it's very challenging to be in all these different countries, and the requirements in terms of local laws. And so personally, I'm a fan of focus. I hit people over the head with focus at VELEZ. I say it all the time. And, one thing we realize is that, in the case, I was in Colombia, the number of real estate companies in the entire country of Colombia is the same as the state of Rio. So the effort to be in multiple countries just didn't justify. So I think it's naive to say, oh, you should be global from day one. I think that it's great. Maybe there's some business models that don't require, feet on the ground, or, maybe they're just strictly online. But I think it's naive just to say that every company should have a global mentality. Brazil's a very large market, and it warrants many companies that can just focus on Brazil only. So I think it really depends on the business model, the opportunity. But I definitely think it is important to look around outside, benchmark from other places. I think that's one thing that Brazil could do more is analyzing. One thing we did, we saw all the successful companies like ours in all the countries around the world, and we tropicalized pieces of those, what worked for those businesses. So I think that's one thing. So you don't have to be global with your whole operations, but you should be global in your vision.
Yeah, you should be global in your thinking from day one, but you should be extremely execution focused. So the entire team needs to be focused on scaling in Brazil. Brazil, again, it's such a deep blue ocean. Looking at a global scale, this is, if you look at sort of big open markets that are up for grabs, with open cultures, Brazil is really one of the most amazing markets out there. So, you have to be very patient and focused and execution driven. Then after a while, once you've reached profitability, you have a stable base here in Brazil, then I do think that Brazil can actually be a very attractive launchpad to build a global business. I think that, again, contrary to sort of popular belief and sort of what Brazilian culture might tell you, amazing global businesses can and will be built with Brazil as a base. Because one thing that we realize as we look at other emerging markets around the globe and sort of comparing them to US, comparing them to Europe, is that there are actually more similarities between Brazil and other emerging markets than there are with, say, the US or Europe. So, why should a US or European company beat you to a certain market if you have the emerging market DNA, if you have the emerging market understanding, and not just expanding into other countries in Latin America, but really looking beyond Latin America, looking at markets in Southeast Asia, Africa. These are markets that are all more similar to Brazil than they are similar to the US or Europe. So again, if you have an efficient execution machine working here in Brazil, you have a great launchpad, you've scaled in Brazil, you've hit profitability, then you should absolutely have the ambition to take that business global from Brazil.
Yeah, and I would maybe switch it around a little bit. I would not say you need to be thinking about global since the beginning. I would think it more in terms of short term versus long term. I would say entrepreneurs should think about building companies for the very, very, very long term versus I'm going to start this and I'm going to sell it in 2 years. And I think that's one of the reasons, if you look at the traditional economy in Brazil, there are very large global companies, and they have been built over a generation or more generations, over a decade. In technology, you still don't see a lot of big technology companies, and I think part of the reason for that is they've sold too quickly. And the mentality has been, I'm going to go build this, and I'm going to sell it in 2 years or 3 years, and it's a bit of a quick success. And so I would think that if you build a company for the long term, the global aspect will come as a natural result of exceeding and succeeding in Brazil, which is a very big market, and then having other opportunities to go beyond and see other countries.
I think that's a fantastic point. And when we talk to entrepreneurs who sold too early, some of them highlight the fact that they built an interesting business, but they didn't have access to capital to grow it really, really, really big. And this is also changing. So I think it's chicken egg a little bit, but it's, you guys are examples, and we have a handful of other examples of entrepreneurs that really want to build a long-lasting businesses, which is refreshing and very much aligned with what we try to help build through Endeavor. Going back to the question of being a multiplier, this is something Endeavor also encourages a lot each entrepreneur to be. So in addition to building your own successful company, as if that was not enough of a challenge, we consider very, very important that you guys act as hubs, as mentors, sources of capital, actually, as well, to other entrepreneurs. And the three of you have been doing interesting things. I just wanted to ask you to share a little bit about that with the audience. Maybe start with you, David, from former VC, entrepreneur, angel. So if you can share a little bit.
Since I was on the investing side and then become an entrepreneur, being very active in the startup ecosystem, trying to mentor and work with different entrepreneurs, is always a bit of a challenge, just because I still think that 95% of my time should be invested in my business today. We're not at the stage yet where I have a lot of free time and I can go around and spending a ton of time with a lot of companies, so it's always a focus or prioritization concern. But we do try to actively help or entrepreneurs. The way we also think about how to build the ecosystem is, Brian alluded to that. In an ideal world, we would want to be a PayPal of Brazil. We would want to see people leaving Nubank or starting new businesses either within Nubank, giving them a structure where they can actually be entrepreneurs within our company and starting businesses and having a lot of autonomy to build interesting companies within the company, or even leaving and starting our businesses in different industries. So that's 10 years from now, that's what we want to see. We want to see a lot of alumni or a lot of people building businesses, technology companies, helping the ecosystem through entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of signs of these sort of early multiplier effects that certainly drove Silicon Valley, drove places like Israel, but also Berlin, London. These early multiplier effects are happening here in Brazil, and we've talked about a lot of people arriving from 2009 to 2012, a lot of foreigners. When we arrived initially, there wasn't much of a support system. There wasn't much of a multiplier effect at all. A lot of these things that we're seeing today were very incipient. And I not only lived in a house with 10 people, we also shared an office with 10 other startups. At the time, a place called Startup Mansion. We just couldn't rent an office because it was so bureaucratic, and we wanted this sort of culture of collaboration, culture of commiseration that you have in Silicon Valley in such a strong form. So we were lucky in the fact that we found this sort of small cluster of like-minded people in the beginning when we started the company, and certainly over the last couple of years, felt a strong desire to give some of that back and to help sort of formalize some of these multiplier effects. So, Endeavor is certainly an initiative to that extent, and us as entrepreneurs passing on our sort of learnings, even though we're only sort of 2 or 5% of the way to really scaling our businesses. It's, as David said, we're talking decades and centuries here, but that doesn't stop us from sharing some of our learnings and trying to give back to the ecosystem. So obviously not losing focus, but investing and mentoring companies is something that is, in my view, extremely important for Brazil today, precisely because there are still so few people doing that. I think that one thing that is quite different here from the US is that the traditional businesses, the corporations, have less of a sense of give back maybe than companies in the US and Europe. So corporate M&A, corporate investment, strategic, and certainly philanthropy as well is still much more limited. And I think it's our role as entrepreneurs to dedicate time to that, to really get the flywheel spinning and get the multiplier effect in the market going. So besides running our companies full time, we're also all investing together collectively. And Flora, my co-founder, and I, Julia Vasconcelos from Peixe Urbano, and a few of us, we're doing that more and more in a more and more active form, because we feel that the market needs entrepreneurs investing in other entrepreneurs and supporting them.
Yeah, he has a fund called Cannery that he's launching too. Just a minute. He won't say that, but I'll say it for him. I think that 2 quick comments. First off, Viva Real, we really struggled in the beginning. We didn't have any resources, we didn't have any money, we didn't have an office. I think the first person we interviewed was in Starbucks, and she crazily joined us. But I think that looking back and the importance of giving back to the community, I try to find a little bit of time to spend with entrepreneurs, give feedback. One thing that we did in Viva Real was we started something called Viva Comunidade. Today we have a building in Consolação. It's an 11-story building. One of the floors has half of the floor is designed to give free office space to startups, and we've had, I think, about 10 or 11 startups that have been in there. They're always very small, technically oriented companies that we think we can learn from as well, and we've given them free office space. So I think that those are initiatives that will help the ecosystem. Also, I'm a big believer in the long-term of investing in the ecosystem. And I just wanted to leave one other comment because one thing you mentioned about all the foreigners, since the topic is foreigners that came down to Brazil. I just wanted to leave a note for the record that I came to Brazil in 2008. So I wasn't one of the foreigners that just jumped on the Brazil bandwagon. And when I did, people said, "Brian, you're kind of crazy to go to Brazil," And then the next year, from being a little crazy and stupid, 2009 came. All of a sudden, I was a genius. It's in 1 year. And then 2014, all of a sudden, I'm stupid again. So I think that the point of that is, you can't really listen to people. You've got to go out, execute your businesses. And hopefully, with everybody here, we can build a really dynamic ecosystem. And it's one of the reasons why I affiliated with Endeavor is because I believe that the strength of what Endeavor can do to really, build an ecosystem that creates incredible sustainability for the country, that empowers people to make a difference, is something that excites me. So that's part of my affiliation with Endeavor is because I believe in the vision.
Fantastic. And I'm going to ignore the clock here as I usually do to thank you guys very, very much. It has been a great contribution to the ecosystem. And I'm going to leave you with a little bit of a challenge. Not anything big, but at Endeavor, we usually ask entrepreneurs to complete the phrase, empreender é. So I'm going to ask you, empreender no Brasil é, and you should say just one word. Anyone that is ready?
Persistência.
Execution.
Aprender a viver.
Thank you guys very much.